Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Do your clients trust you? Maybe you could use a little help from our guest, Larry Jacobson. Larry, thanks for being with us today.
Very glad to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Larry, your book is entitled Insta-Trust. Can you explain the title and why is that title so important today?
Sure. We spent a lot of time trying to pick a title for the book, and Insta-Trust came to mind because it really identifies what we need to do in today's society. In today's society, people make snap decisions. We can thank social media for that. And people's attention spans are not nearly what they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so if you're a professional or a salesperson or a negotiator or pretty much anyone in business, you really have to build fast trust with someone that you're working with. And so the notion of Insta-Trust, Insta-Trust is basically a mindset and a process where you put relationship building at the forefront of your initial meeting in a business setting. And so rather than people starting out with really being diagnostic, asking them, a bunch of questions to immediately try to solve your problem, Insta-Trust is an approach where we try to put relationship building at the forefront of your initial interactions.
Now, today, I know growing up, we had relationships, myself and my family, with professional people, an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer, and it was kind of, if you went to Dr. So-and-so, you were going there till he or she passed away. And right. If George was your accountant, you pretty much were going to go there unless you had some big argument or you root for the Mets and he roots for the Yankees. Or, I'm kidding. But, something that would sure. take you out of the mainstream. But today, it seems we're more dependent on a commercial, things like that. Is that just a change in society?
Well, that's a great and unique question. I think we still tend to go to professionals being doctors, dentists, lawyers, accountants, based upon either recommendations, referrals, maybe looking at, Yelp or other reviews as opposed to just commercials. But there's no question that in certain areas of professional practice, commercials are really, and I'm trying to put the right words together, commercials basically spur on the possibility of interacting with that particular practice. When you think of implants, Clear Choice, I don't know if Clear Choice is big in your audience, but I can tell you here in Chicago, whether it's Clear Choice or other oral surgeons or periodontists, they have a lot of ads on at 5 o'clock news. In terms of personal injury lawyers, around the country, you see ads for personal injury lawyers. And what I would say is the commercials with respect to those particular companies may get you in the door, but unless you've got the right person asking the questions in your first interaction, they're going to go out the door and not buy your services. And so I would say the old-fashioned approach is still working. The new-fashioned approach still has a ways to go in terms of building that personal rapport with somebody on an important matter.
Is there an accepted amount of time or a time period that it takes? If I just met you and we were talking, let's say waiting for a plane or something or train, that 30 seconds, 3 minutes or some, what do they used to call it, an elevator pitch, 30 seconds?
Yeah, the types of things that I'm talking about are not really as susceptible to an elevator pitch because they tend to be uniquely important to the individual. And one of the ways that whether it's professionals or salespeople get into trouble is they make huge assumptions as to what the problem is. And frankly, the person you're talking with may not even know the real problem. They may just see the symptoms of the problem. So if you were to ask me how long it would take to build Insta-Trust, again, it depends on the situation, and I'm not trying to be evasive. It depends on the situation, and it depends on the complexity of the matter. But I would say in many instances, you should be able to at least start building Insta-Trust within the first 5 to 10 minutes.
Your book, is it more geared toward the professions, the lawyer, the doctor, the accountant, the architect? Or does this also apply to our landscaper, the plumber, and any other person that we may hire to do some work for us?
The book was directed, because we all have to have niches to go after. So it was designed in the first instance for either professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, etc., or negotiators, deal makers. But it's really applicable in any business setting. It's applicable, if you're a real estate broker. If, to use your example, if you're a landscape architect, or a landscape company, it's applicable there. It's really applicable in any situation involving a business setting.
Now, of course, the big thing today, Larry, is everything is virtual, or almost everything. We're broadcasting from a college, and many of the classes are virtual, and people like that. And in fact, the surveys show they enjoy it more because it cuts down on in-between time, lost time, parking, etc. Does that change the rules of the game for building up a trust first impression?
I don't think it changes the rules of the game. It does make it more difficult, because in a virtual setting, there are lots of cues that you're not going to be able to see or hear. Voice tone, which is very important to see whether you're connecting with somebody, is much more constant in a virtual setting than in a in-person setting. Eye contact, which is very important in terms of building relationships, is not as easy to discern in a visual setting. You can't see somebody if their legs are crossed or if their arms are folded in a virtual setting the same way you can in person. And those are all very important, because if you're getting cues that you're not connecting, then you have to go to plan B and plan C. And it's much more difficult to do that in a virtual setting. And then the final thing I'll say about virtual settings is that people's attention span in virtual settings is not nearly as great as it is in an in-person setting.
Very interesting.
Pardon?
No, I said that's a very interesting point, because I never thought of the time limit. I was thinking of all other things, and you just hit on something that I just never even considered.
Right. And so in a virtual setting, people can look over towards their phones. There could be other people in the room. They could even put you on mute for a short period of time. So, Insta-Trust applies just as much in virtual settings as in-person settings, but you have to work a lot harder in virtual settings, because you're just not going to be able to get all the nonverbal cues that you could if you were meeting face-to-face.
Is this something, looking at your book, and it certainly makes sense. If I go into someone, there are people today I just don't feel comfortable with. A new doctor, a new dentist, someone who I even hear about, just something about them. And I'm not going to put down a lot of money for a car with someone I don't trust, or an insurance policy, etc. So what I'm getting at to you, is this taught anywhere, or is it only in maybe schools that deal with the sales approach and how to win a customer?
To be brutally candid, I'm not aware that it's taught anywhere, let's say at a college or a university level. I have a law degree. I can tell you that we spent zero time in 3 years of law school as to how to build relationships with prospective and current clients. I can tell you, even in my first few years of legal practice, we didn't have any in-house training or anything like that, to do that. And I think that this is just something that is lacking. We hear about doctors and bedside manner. And in medical school, you talk to physicians and they say they get a little training in this, but frankly, they don't get very much. And don't get me wrong, some of my best friends are doctors, and I have enormous respect for doctors. And in fact, tomorrow I'm going for my annual physical. But the challenge that doctors have is that they are trained for 4 years in medical school and then however many years for residency and fellowship, they're trained just to get into it in terms of being diagnosticians and basically just getting to the medical issue, not asking how you're doing, how you're feeling, so on and so forth. And that just puts people off. And I have an example in the book where about 10 years ago, I had to go for a knee replacement, and the surgeon, who's now retired, was a world-renowned surgeon. People came from all over the world, literally, to see this person. So he had a two-step approach. He had a nurse whose sole job was to meet with patients and to build trust and to answer any questions. You needed to be there for 30 or 60 minutes. She'd answer every question. And then, so by the time we got to see the surgeon, he was already fully briefed. And then he too would basically say, I know that you've been told about the procedure, but I'm here to answer any questions you have about me, what I do, how I can help you, how I will help you. And he basically, within 15 seconds, put me at ease. I mean, I would have had the surgery from him anyhow because he was so well renowned and respected. But he really came off not only as a great surgeon, but as a nice guy, a mensch, somebody that you'd really, really would put your life's hands in when it came to a new knee.
And you are, literally. Larry, we have to take a brief break.
Two new knees.
So you did it twice. But I do have a follow-up for that because I remember the story in your book. So I do have a follow-up question. But at this point in the show, we just want to remind our listeners that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Larry Jacobson. He's the author of the book, Insta-Trust. And Larry, we're going to ask you if you tell our audience, is there a website where we can learn more?
Sure. Please go to www.protrustconsulting.com.
So it's trustconsulting.com.
Yes, no dashes or spaces.
And because of the unusual title, the one-word title is Insta-Trust. Trust, and we'll give you that information again later in the show. Larry, you talked about your visit to the doctor, but I remember when in your book, when you first went to him and you talked to him and you had great faith in him, you also asked him a rather unique question, and you're laughing now, so I think you remember it. Something like, how many times did you fail, or did it not work out?
Something along those lines. And he answered the question candidly. I mean, you're dealing with, surgery, so, you don't have 100% of the, of the surgeries being successful, especially with respect to knee replacements. But what he did say is in situations where it didn't take, he was there to make sure that he would fix it and make it good.
I always appreciate that. One of my tests for someone, if they tell me how many times this worked, 100 out of 100, 1,000 out of 1,000, we have no competition. As soon as someone tells me that, I always put them in the not too truthful box because everybody is going to have a bad day or a mistake. It might be 1 out of 100. It might be 3. It might not be the doctor's fault. Maybe you're an anomaly. Maybe something is different or, your structure does not work out for them. But when anybody is too perfect, that they never fail, or if that's the pitch they're giving me, it always puts me on guard, and I'm always a little more afraid of them.
One of the things, and what in the book that I said that has gotten a lot of attention is don't trust somebody who says, please trust me. If somebody has to literally tell you, please trust me or trust that I know what I'm doing or what have you, that is a defensive sign, which could cover up integrity issues, competence issues, confidence issues, or what have you. Somebody who is good at what they do displays quiet confidence. They don't need to say, trust me. That's a warning sign that everybody should be aware of.
You're right, of course, and there's certain people, and I think any of us would agree, and obviously mostly medical that we come across or professionals, but you talk to them for a few minutes and you want them handling your case. You'd even pay them more because not only do you feel comfortable, and not just because they root for the home team or they're in an office in your building or something, but they do have that quiet confidence that you feel they know they're good at what they do. They're going to be able to handle it. And if something unusual comes up, they're not going to get bent out of shape. They're going to know what to do and what the next step is. Larry, you talk about active listening. I read that term in your book. What does that mean and how does that help us?
Active listening is a phrase and a concept that's been talked about a lot over the last decade. Since Dan Goleman wrote Emotional Intelligence, which is now, I think, 25 years ago, a lot of people have heard the term active listening. And active listening, the short answer is active listening is basically listening to understand and rather than listening to respond. A lot of us professionals, and I'll throw myself in that category, listen not necessarily to understand what the person is saying, but listening so that as soon as they're done speaking, I can respond. And it may or may not be germane to what the other person is saying. Really what active listening is trying to listen to the whole person. And the whole person is not just necessarily the words that they're saying. The words that they're saying are very important. But also, again, getting back to voice tone, facial expressions, other expressions, really trying to figure out the other person's personality, trying to figure out, if they're still uncomfortable with you, trying to figure out how you can make them more comfortable and whatever. So active listening is more than just using your ears to hear the words. It's using your ears to hear the tone and then using your eyes, to basically figure out who they are and what they are and why they're there. And one of the things, and you asked early on if there were courses or and what have you in building trust or Insta-Trust. And, I said I wasn't aware of it, but there are a lot of universities that do spend time training active listening. I mean, certainly people who are trained as psychiatrists and psychologists get that training, but even other professionals do as well. And the whole notion of active listening is not just hearing what they say and listening to understand, but making them feel like you're understanding. So you'll hear a lot of active listening experts say, well, paraphrase what they say so that they can hear that you're hearing what they say. And that's fine to an extent, but it can be overused. Because if all you're doing is always paraphrasing what they're saying, you're coming off as robotic and not human. So like any other tool in your toolkit, you need to use it judiciously in a way that you can really show them that you're listening, you're understanding, and then at some point you're showing your understanding by helping them come up with solutions.
Now, one of the terms you use is called a teaching mindset. Now, obviously, for teachers, that's important, but why would that be important for an accountant or an architect or somebody in another profession?
That's a great question. And, I feel like I have a teaching mindset because part of my role is while I'm working with a client to solve a problem, I'm doing it in a manner, and this is part of building Insta-Trust, I'm doing it in a collaborative manner. And if you think of the best teachers that you had, the best teachers that you had were not those that lectured you completely or basically just stood up at a blackboard and wrote a whole bunch of things down and expected you to memorize them. Your best teachers were those who helped you solve problems. It could be a math teacher helping you understand, algebra or statistics. It could be an English teacher who literally went over your paper line by line to give you suggestions as to how to edit and rewrite. It's the same thing in a professional relationship. If I'm an accountant, I don't expect my clients to become tax experts. If I'm an attorney, I don't expect them to become experts in contracts. And if I'm a surgeon, I sure don't expect them to become experts in surgery. But what I do expect them to do is hopefully we've built a relationship of candor and disclosure and trust where, for instance, an accountant, the client can come in and say, I'm thinking of doing such and such. Is that a deductible expense? Or if I'm, an attorney and a client comes in for a contract, I'm thinking of doing this, that, or the other thing. Tell me whether that's a good idea or not and why. And so a teaching mindset basically is a mindset that puts the professional or salesperson, negotiator, whatever, and the other person in a collaborative approach to try to come up with a solution.
Larry, once again, before we go further, I'd like our audience to know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Larry Jacobson, Jacobson. His book is Insta-Trust. That's INSTA-Trust. And Larry, would you tell us about the website where we can learn more?
Sure. It's www.ProTrust Consulting, all one word, no dashes or dots.com. So ProTrustConsulting.com.
And if you missed any part of the show, you can go to our podcast, which is just a replay of the show. That's on nccradio.org. That's nccradio.org. Just look for Insta-Trust with our guest, Larry Jacobson. Larry, you have a great question. And I'd like to pose this because sometimes it's just one sentence or one question that we say to our audience. This is the takeaway from today's show. And you suggest ask yourself, what other professionals do you trust and why? And I thought that's a great question when trying to learn how to be more trustworthy and trusted by our clients. What are some of the things that you've taken from other professionals that you've dealt with and want to see in future professionals?
Sure. The first one is, and I apologize for repeating myself, but that the professional in the first or second question are geared towards me, my problem, what I'm there for, not, basically just a series of questions asking, trying to do like a checklist, a diagnostic checklist. So the first thing is to show that you care about me as a person and not me as a problem, for lack of a better phrase. Beyond that, what I'm looking for is somebody who comes off as quietly confident and competent. I've made it very clear in the book, it's very challenging in an initial meeting to determine somebody's integrity. There aren't very many cues in terms of determining somebody's integrity. Once in a while you can. I gave the example a few minutes ago about if somebody says, you can trust me, that's a red flag. But you can determine somebody's confidence level. And even if you're a complete novice in a particular area, you can get a sense as to whether or not the person you're dealing with appears to be competent. Again, that gets back to a question that not enough people ask in terms of, how many situations like mine have you dealt with? How easy or difficult is it? What situations didn't work out, correctly? Things like that. And really if I'm looking to hire somebody else, I'm looking to hire somebody who's confident, competent, candid about successes and failures, and shows a willingness to meet me as who I am and not who they think I am.
You use the word in your book, hooks, HOOKS, and you say that hooks may be helpful. What are hooks and how do we use them?
Well, it's the first time I've been asked that question. Hooks are basically techniques, and I just alluded to a couple of them, techniques that are designed to build trust with another person. And those hooks, just to reiterate, are to show that you're listening to understand, that you're being responsive to what they're saying, that you're not working off of a preordained checklist, and that you're trying to morph into caring for them and then into, showing quiet confidence in your ability to help them and showing, without coming off as a know-it-all, your ability to help them with their problem. Those are hooks.
You talk about the manner in which we deliver a talk to our either client or audience, so to speak. Can you explain, are there the buzzwords or a term that makes us feel more relaxed if I'm talking to you or if I was coming to you for some professional advice?
Yes. I mean, one of the things, and I do not mention this in the book, but one of the things in terms of a mindset is demonstrating to the other person or persons that you're working with that you're willing to go into the trenches with them to get it done. If I were to be asked one global approach that one wants to convey in terms of an initial meeting, it's that, let's get in the trenches together. So how do you do that? You basically work with them, trying to build a personal relationship. You try to find out compassionately what their issue is. And then you begin to morph into a collaborative, teaching, problem-solving mode where both parties are involved, and it's not the professional speaking from up high that I shall say that your problem can be solved by doing X. At some point you may get there, but not early on, and not until you've built that relationship that's trustworthy. I'll give you
Larry, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to cut you short because we're just within 30 seconds of wrapping up. But I apologize for that. But before we do wrap up, I want our audience to know our guest today has been Larry Jacobson. That's Jacobson. He is the author of Insta-Trust. That's INSTA then the word trust, TRUST. And Larry, the website once again?
ProTrustConsulting.com.
Larry, thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and I've really enjoyed being with you.
I would like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.